"Mom, you're too old to manage money now," my son said, loud enough for every person at my birthday table to hear. "From now on, Vanessa and I will take over before you lose everything." The silver fork in my hand stopped halfway above the salad plate. Across from me, Mark stood with his wineglass raised, wearing the same confident smile his father used to wear when closing a deal, except Thomas's smile had warmth behind it. Mark's had calculation. The Oak Room was crowded that Friday night, full of soft piano music, low laughter, and waiters moving between white tablecloths with trays of steaks and glasses of iced tea. I had chosen that restaurant because Thomas took me there every anniversary for 26 years. I thought turning 68 deserved one evening that still felt like mine. I wore my navy dress, the one with pearl buttons at the cuffs, and the small diamond pendant Thomas gave me before his first heart surgery. For 1 hour, I let myself believe the night might be gentle. Then my son stood up and turned my birthday into a meeting. Vanessa sat beside him in a cream-colored blazer, her blonde hair tucked behind one ear, her smile polished and still. She did not look surprised. That was the first thing I noticed. Not the words. Not the heat rising in my face. Her stillness. A woman who hears something shocking moves even a little. Vanessa only reached into the leather folder on her lap and slid a stack of papers across the table toward me. "Eleanor," she said softly, using the tone people use in hospitals when they think the patient cannot understand them, "this is really for your own peace of mind." My youngest granddaughter, Lily, looked down at her plate. My nephew cleared his throat. My sister, Carol, pressed her lips together but said nothing. No one laughed. No one defended me either. That silence settled over the table heavier than the thick white tablecloth. I looked at the top page. Durable power of attorney. My name was printed in bold letters, Eleanor Whitaker, as if that made it harmless. Beneath it, Mark's name appeared as the person authorized to manage my accounts, my investments, my home, and anything else they could fit into. Clean legal language. A silver pen rested on top, placed there like a little invitation to surrender. "You brought paperwork to my birthday dinner?" I asked. My voice came out calm. That seemed to bother Mark more than anger would have. "Mom, don't make this dramatic," he said, lowering his glass. "Dad handled the big decisions. Since he's been gone, you've been alone in that house, paying bills by mail, driving that old Buick, refusing online banking. It's not responsible anymore." Vanessa leaned forward. "We only want to protect you." Protect. That word had become her favorite hiding place. She used it when she suggested I sell the house Thomas and I paid off after 31 years. She used it when she told Mark I should stop meeting with Robert Gaines at First Ohio Bank because older people get confused by financial products. She used it when she labeled my carefulness as fear and my independence as stubbornness. I folded my napkin once, then twice, smoothing the edge with my thumb. It gave my hand something to do. "I have paid every bill on time since before you were born, Mark." He gave a small laugh, not cruel enough to sound like an insult, but not kind enough to be anything else. "That's exactly the point. Times changed. You didn't." Something inside me went very quiet. I thought of Mark at 8 years old, sitting at our kitchen table with a coffee can full of coins, learning the difference between saving and wanting. I thought of Thomas standing behind him, winking at me because we both knew I was the one who balanced the company books after dinner while everyone else slept. I thought of the woman I had been for 40 years, invisible not because I lacked ability, but because I never needed applause for doing what had to be done. Vanessa pushed the pen closer. "Just sign tonight and we can all relax." I looked at her hand, manicured, steady, resting near the folder as if it already belonged to her. Then I looked at my son. His eyes did not hold concern. They held impatience. He wanted this finished before dessert. Picked up the pen. For a moment, everyone at the table seemed to breathe again. Mark's shoulders loosened. Vanessa's smile widened by the smallest degree. Even the waiter paused near the wall, sensing the strange tension of a family pretending not to fall apart in public. I turned the pen slowly between my fingers and set it back on the papers without signing. "Not tonight," I said. Mark's face hardened. "Mom, it is my birthday," I said, standing carefully, "and I would like to go home." Vanessa's smile disappeared so quickly I almost admired the honesty of it. I placed enough cash on the table to cover my meal, my coffee, and the slice of lemon cake I had not touched. Then I picked up my purse and walked out past the piano, past the hostess stand, past the framed photographs of old Columbus families smiling on walls that had seen plenty of private betrayals dressed up as concern. Outside, the March air was cold enough to sting my cheeks. I sat in my Buick for a full minute before starting the engine. I did not cry. Crying would have made the night too simple. The next morning at 8:17, Mark received a call from First Ohio Bank. I know because Robert Gaines called me at 8:22, just as I was pouring my coffee. His voice was steady, professional, almost gentle. "Mrs. Whitaker," he said, "your son has been notified. The account you flagged attempted another transfer at 7:49 this morning." I looked out the kitchen window at the maple tree Thomas planted the year Mark was born. Its branches were bare but not dead. "Good," I said. Then now he knows I was paying attention. Robert had been our banker for almost 25 years, long enough to remember when Thomas and I first opened the business account with $2,000, 3 used desks, and more confidence than sense. People thought Thomas built Whitaker Medical Supply by himself because he shook hands at trade shows, spoke at Rotary lunches, and wore tailored suits that made strangers trust him. What they never saw was me at the kitchen table after midnight, sorting invoices beside a half-empty cup of coffee while Mark slept upstairs with his baseball glove under his pillow. I knew which hospital paid late every December. I knew which vendors added quiet fees to shipping orders. I knew how to stretch a dollar until it did the work. Of 2. Thomas used to kiss the top of my head and say, "Ellie, I sell the dream. You keep it alive." After he passed 3 years ago, people began speaking to me as if the part of my mind that understood numbers had been buried with him. It started gently. Mark offered to look over a few things. Vanessa brought me folders with large labels, as if I had suddenly forgotten how paper worked. They asked about my passwords in the same tone they used when asking whether I had taken my vitamins. I noticed, but I let it pass. Grief had made me tired, and tired people choose their battles carefully. The first winter alone in the house was the hardest. The furnace clicked on at night, and I would wake expecting to hear Thomas breathing beside me. His side of the bed stayed neat because I could not bring myself to disturb it. Every morning I made coffee for one and stood at the sink watching school buses roll past our street in Clintonville. The neighborhood had changed over the years. Young couples jogged with strollers. Old houses got new kitchens. But my house still carried our fingerprints. The small dent in the dining room wall from Mark's 10th birthday party. The scratch on the oak floor where Thomas dragged in the Christmas tree one year without measuring the doorway. The maple outside the kitchen window, taller than the roof now, planted when our son was born. Mark used to call every Sunday after church. Then it became every other Sunday. Then only when Vanessa reminded him, or when he needed something signed. First I blamed work. He had taken a senior position at the company after Thomas died. And I knew responsibility could make a person short on tenderness. But Vanessa's influence entered slowly, like cold air through a window that was not quite closed. She never argued with me directly. She smiled. She complimented my pie crust, my garden, my patience. Then she would say things that left little marks. "You are so brave living alone at your age. It must be exhausting keeping track of all those accounts." I told Mark we should make things easier before something unfortunate happens. Something unfortunate. That was how she described my independence. Not a right. Not a lifetime of earned judgment. A risk. 2 months before my birthday dinner, she stopped by with a brochure for a retirement community outside Dublin. The cover showed smiling gray-haired people playing cards near a fireplace. "Just look at it," she said, placing it on my kitchen counter. "No pressure." I looked at the monthly cost and almost laughed. "This is more than my mortgage ever was." "But you would not need the house anymore," she said lightly. "And honestly, Eleanor, a place this size is too much for one woman." I was rinsing a teacup when she said it. My hand stayed under the warm water. "This place was enough for me when your husband was learning to walk in the hallway." She blinked, then smiled again, but the smile had lost its softness. "Of course. I only meant Mark worries." That was another thing she liked to do. She wrapped her wants in my son's name, so refusing her sounded like hurting him. By the end of February, Mark began repeating her phrases word for word. "Simplify things, Mom. Let us be practical. Dad would not want you overwhelmed." The last one made me look up from my checkbook. Thomas would have hated that. Thomas trusted me with every hidden piece of our life. He trusted me so completely that 6 months before he died, he insisted we update the family trust and make me the primary authority over every major account. Mark knew about some of it, but not all. Vanessa knew even less. That was her mistake. She believed quiet meant empty. She believed old-fashioned meant helpless. She saw my paper statements, my mailed bills, my Buick with the cracked leather seat, and assumed I had fallen behind the world. She did not know that every Friday morning, I sat at my desk with a magnifying lamp, a calculator, and a yellow legal pad, reviewing every line the way I had done since 1989. She did not know I had noticed the first transfer attempt 3 weeks before my birthday. She did not know Robert had noticed it too. The first transfer attempt was not large enough to frighten most people. $9,800. That was the amount on the notice Robert showed me when I visited First Ohio Bank on a rainy Tuesday morning in late February. It had been requested from an investment subaccount connected to the Whitaker Family Trust, marked as an administrative reimbursement, and directed toward a limited liability company I did not recognize. The name was clean and forgettable. VMW Holdings. 3 letters and 1 polite little word, the kind of name designed to slide past tired eyes. But my eyes were not tired that morning. I read it twice, then asked Robert for a printed copy. He closed his office door before handing it to me. That told me more than the paper did. Robert was a careful man, silver-haired, narrow-framed, with a habit of removing his glasses when he had bad news. He had removed them before I sat down. "Eleanor," he said, "the request did not go through. It triggered a review because the receiving account was newly created." I nodded, looking at the routing details. "Who initiated it?" He hesitated just long enough. "It came through credentials connected to Mark's administrative access. There are moments when pain arrives like a storm, loud and unmistakable. This was not one of them. This was quieter. A thin crack forming inside something I had spent a lifetime protecting. I had trusted Mark with limited access after Thomas died, mostly for business continuity. He could review company distributions, payroll reserves, vendor payments, nothing personal, nothing final. That access was a courtesy. A bridge. It had never been a key to my life. Could it have been a mistake? I asked because mothers ask that even when they already know the answer. Robert looked down at the paper. The description was specific. The authorization path was specific. Mistakes usually look messy. I folded the copy and placed it in my purse. My hands were steady, but I remember the sound of rain ticking against the bank windows, each drop small and persistent. Robert leaned forward. "I can freeze everything today." "No," I said. He studied my face. "Eleanor, I need you to understand what this could become." "I do understand." That was the part everyone kept forgetting. I understood too well. One suspicious transfer could be explained away. One block payment could be blamed on a clerk, a software error, a misunderstanding. If I acted too quickly, Mark would walk in with Vanessa beside him, wearing concern like a winter coat, and tell everyone I was confused, paranoid, grieving too long. They would use my caution as proof against me. So I asked Robert to set alerts instead. Every attempted transfer, every password change, every document request, every contact from any attorney not already approved by me. He looked unhappy, but he did it. "You are sure?" he asked. I looked at the framed photograph on his wall, a black and white picture of downtown Columbus from the 1960s, all streetcars and wool coats. "I have spent my whole life watching numbers tell the truth people try to hide," I said. "Let us see what the numbers say next." After that morning, Vanessa began appearing more often. She came by with soup I had not asked for, magazines about downsizing, and a cheerful list of estate attorneys who specialized in elder transitions. She wore soft colors, spoke gently, and moved through my kitchen as if measuring it for someone else's furniture. One afternoon, she opened the cabinet where Thomas kept his old coffee mugs and said, "You know, a lot of families wait too long to plan. Then decisions have to be made under stress." I was peeling apples at the counter. "What decisions?" She turned, smiling. "Oh, nothing urgent. Just the practical things. The house, the accounts, medical permissions, who can sign if you are unavailable." "Unavailable?" I repeated. That is a tidy word. Her smile flickered. I only mean emergencies happen. They do. I sliced another apple. That is why Thomas and I planned carefully. She did not like that. I saw it in the way her hand tightened around her purse strap. Vanessa preferred to believe Thomas had left loose ends. Loose ends can be pulled. A careful plan has knots. That evening, Mark called and asked whether Vanessa had upset me. Not whether I was all right. Not whether I wanted to talk. Whether Vanessa had upset me, as if my feelings were a weather problem caused by my own sensitivity. She is trying to help, he said. I looked at the apple pie cooling on the stove, the crust browned the way. Thomas liked it. Is she? Mom, please do not start. She has been incredibly patient. Patient? I almost smiled. Vanessa had been patient the way a person waits at a locked door with someone else's key in mind. The next alert came 2 days later. A password reset request on the trust portal. Then another 6 minutes after midnight. Then a call from a law office in Worthington asking the bank to confirm document requirements for transferring authority to an adult child. Robert sent me everything. I printed each notice and placed it in a blue folder labeled Home Repairs, because neither Mark nor Vanessa would ever look there. People who want your money rarely care about your gutters. By the time my birthday arrived, I knew the dinner was not a celebration. I knew the leather folder Vanessa carried was not there by accident. I knew Mark had not invented those words at the table. He had rehearsed them. Still, knowing did not stop the hurt. A mother can see the knife coming and still remember the child who once reached for her hand crossing the street. The morning after my birthday dinner did not feel dramatic. That surprised me. I had expected my heart to pound or my hands to shake, but the house was quiet in the ordinary way houses are quiet before the world learns what has been happening inside them. I made oatmeal with brown sugar, rinsed my spoon, and wiped the counter twice even though it was already clean. The blue folder marked Home Repairs sat on the kitchen table beside my coffee cup. Inside it were copies of the block transfer, the password reset notices, the inquiry from the Worthington Law Office, and a printed screenshot of VMW Holdings from the Ohio Secretary of State website. Vanessa Marie Whitaker. That was what the initials stood for. She had formed the company 11 days before the first transfer attempt. The address listed was not her home with Mark. It was a private mailbox inside a shipping store near Polaris Parkway. I stared at that address for a long time, not because it shocked me, but because it explained her confidence. Vanessa had not been pushing for convenience. She had built a door and expected me to hand her the key. Robert's call came at 8:22 and by 8:40 Mark was calling me. I let the phone ring. His name flashed across the screen again and again, filling my quiet kitchen with the sound I used to welcome. When he was in college, Mark called me after every exam. When he got his first job, he called from the parking lot because he was too excited to drive home. When Thomas died, he called me every night for 2 weeks, not saying much, just breathing on the other end while grief sat between us like a third person. That son felt far away now, hidden behind the man who had stood at the Oak Room with a legal document and a prepared insult. On the 5th call, I answered. Good morning, Mark. What did you do? His voice was sharp, too sharp for a son speaking to his mother before 9 in the morning. I looked out at the maple tree. You will need to be more specific. The bank called me. Robert Gaines said there is some sort of hold on the trust account. He said you flagged a transfer. That is correct. Silence. Then a shorter breath. Mom, why would you do that? Because someone attempted to move money where it did not belong. That is not what happened. The answer came too quickly. I heard Vanessa in it. Not her voice, but her rhythm. Fast denial first, explanation later. Then what happened? I asked. It was a restructuring step. Vanessa found a better way to organize some family assets, that is all. You misunderstood. There it was. The word they had been saving for me. Misunderstood. Clean, soft, and insulting. A word that could make theft sound like confusion if repeated often enough. I stirred my coffee even though I had already added cream. The receiving company is registered to Vanessa. Another silence. This one lasted longer. She was helping, he said. With a private mailbox and a transfer just under $10,000? Do not talk like that, he snapped. You are making this sound criminal. I am describing paperwork. You are letting that banker scare you. Robert has always acted like Dad trusted him more than his own family. That landed somewhere old and tender. Thomas had trusted Robert. He had also trusted me. Mark seemed to remember only the parts of his father's life that served him. Your father chose the structure of that trust himself, I said. Your father is gone. The words came out flat, and for a second neither of us spoke. I set my spoon down carefully. There are sentences that cannot be taken back, not because they are loud, but because they show you the room inside another person. Mark softened his tone after that, as if he realized he had stepped too far. Mom, I did not mean it that way. I know exactly how you meant it. Please just meet with us. Vanessa is upset. She feels accused. I almost laughed then, but I did not. Vanessa feeling accused had become the emergency. Not my birthday. Not the papers. Not the attempt to move money out of a trust she did not control. Her discomfort had somehow outranked my dignity. I will meet at the bank, I said. Tomorrow at 10. No, we should talk at my house. Privately. At the bank, Mark. His breathing changed. Why are you being so difficult? I looked at the blue folder, at the neat stack of proof no one knew I had. Because difficult is what people call a woman when she stops being convenient. He did not answer. When the call ended, I sat there in the quiet kitchen, holding the phone in my hand. I wanted to feel victorious. Instead, I felt old in a way that had nothing to do with birthdays. Not weak. Not confused. Just old enough to understand that losing respect from your child is a grief with no funeral. The next morning, I arrived at First Ohio Bank 20 minutes early. I have always believed early gives a person time to notice what late people miss. The lobby smelled faintly of coffee and floor polish, the same as it had for years, though the old teller windows had been replaced with smooth counters and little screens that asked customers to tap instead of sign. I sat in a leather chair near the ficus tree and watched people come and go with deposits, questions, small worries folded into envelopes. I had worn a gray wool coat, low black heels, and the pearl earrings Thomas bought me after our first profitable year. Not because I wanted to look wealthy, because I wanted to remember who I had been before my own son tried to reduce me to an inconvenience. Robert came out of his office at exactly 10 minutes before 10. His expression softened when he saw me. Eleanor, he said, they are not here yet. They will be. He glanced at the blue folder on my lap. Do you want to wait in my office? I shook my head. No. Let them see me sitting here. He understood. That was one of Robert's gifts. He did not fill silence with comfort I had not asked for. At 10 o'clock sharp, Mark walked through the glass doors with Vanessa beside him. She looked immaculate in a camel coat and dark sunglasses, though the sky outside was cloudy. Mark looked tired. His jaw was tight, and his hair was slightly uneven, the way it got when he ran his hands through it too many times. Vanessa removed her sunglasses slowly when she saw me, as if we had all gathered for a misunderstanding instead of an accounting. Eleanor, she said, too brightly, I wish we could have handled this as a family. I stood. So do I. Mark looked around the lobby, embarrassed by the public setting. Mom, this is unnecessary. Then it should be quick. Robert led us into the conference room at the back of the bank. It had a long cherrywood table, a pitcher of water, and framed photographs of Columbus landmarks on the walls. I took the seat closest to the window. Mark and Vanessa sat across from me. Vanessa placed her purse on the table, then moved it to the floor after Robert looked at it. Small things tell the truth. Robert opened a folder and laid 3 documents in front of us. Before we begin, I want to clarify that Mrs. Whitaker requested a review of attempted activity connected to the Whitaker Family Trust several weeks ago. Mark turned toward me. Several weeks? I looked at him. Yes. Vanessa gave a quiet laugh. I am sorry, but that seems excessive. Mark and I were trying to streamline things. Eleanor has been under a lot of stress since Thomas passed. Robert did not look at her. Mrs. Whitaker provided specific authorization for monitoring, and the bank acted according to that request. Mark leaned forward. The transfer was not improper. It was preparatory. Vanessa was helping set up an entity for family asset management. VMW Holdings, Robert said. Vanessa's face changed before she could stop it. Just a shade. Just enough. Robert slid the printed registration across the table. Registered to Vanessa Marie Whitaker. Created 11 days before the first attempted transfer. Mailing address listed as a private mailbox near Polaris Parkway. Mark stared at the paper. For the first time since all this began, he looked at his wife instead of at me. Vanessa. She touched his sleeve. Mark, do not let them twist this. We talked about protecting the assets. We talked about Mom signing first, he said quietly. I heard the crack in his certainty. It did not bring me pleasure. That is the strange thing about truth. When it finally enters the room, it does not always feel like justice. Sometimes it feels like watching a house you once loved show the termites in the walls. Robert placed the second document down. There were 2 password reset attempts on the trust portal after midnight on March 3rd, both from an internet address associated with the Whitaker residence. Mark swallowed. Vanessa folded her hands. That could have been anyone. The device identifier matches a laptop previously used to access Mark Whitaker's administrative profile, Robert said. The room grew very still. I watched my son's face move through denial, confusion, then the first thin edge of fear. Not fear of me. Fear of what he had allowed. Mom, he said, and his voice was lower now, almost the voice of the boy who used to call me from college. Why did you not just ask me? I wanted to answer gently. I wanted to tell him a mother should not have to ask why her son is standing beside a locked door with a copied key. Instead, I opened my blue folder and took out the birthday dinner papers Vanessa had pushed toward me. Because you brought these to a restaurant, I said. Because you called concern what felt like control. Because you asked me to sign away my life between the salad and the cake. Vanessa's cheeks flushed. That is unfair. I looked at her then. Really looked. No, Vanessa. Unfair is assuming a woman becomes foolish just because her hair turns silver. Robert placed the final document in the center of the table. It was Thomas's trust summary, the one Mark had never cared enough to read closely. Mrs. Whitaker is the primary authority, Robert said. No transfer of control can occur without her direct approval. Mark closed his eyes. Vanessa said nothing. I picked up the silver pen Robert had set beside the document. This time, I was ready to sign something. I signed 3 documents in that conference room, but none of them were the papers Vanessa had brought to my birthday dinner. The first removed Mark's administrative access to every trust account, business reserve, and investment statement connected to my name. The second placed a temporary restriction on any transaction involving VMW Holdings until the bank's review was complete. The third appointed my attorney, Margaret Ellis, as the independent contact for all future legal requests. My hand did not tremble once. That surprised Vanessa. I could see it in the way she watched the pen move across the page, her eyes following each letter of my signature as if she had expected age to make even that difficult. Eleanor and Whitaker. I wrote it slowly, clearly. The same name Thomas had written beside his when we bought our first house on a 30-year mortgage and promised each other we would never let money speak louder than family. Mark sat across from me, pale and quiet. For once, he did not try to interrupt. Vanessa did. This is extreme, she said. You are punishing us for trying to help. I capped the pen and set it down. No. I am preventing help from becoming ownership. Robert gathered the signed documents, but he did not leave the room. He knew there was more coming. Mark rubbed his forehead with both hands. Mom, I did not know she created the company that way. Vanessa turned sharply toward him. Mark. He looked at her then, really looked, and I saw something painful pass over his face. Not innocence. Not yet. But recognition. The first clear look at a road he had been walking without asking where it ended. Did you set up that mailbox? He asked. Her jaw tightened. For privacy. From who? He asked. She had no good answer. People rarely do when the plain question is the right one. I opened my blue folder again and took out a photocopy of a letter from Thomas. I had not planned to show it that day. Some things from a marriage should stay private, folded away with anniversary cards and old photographs. But Mark had invoked his father too many times while doing things Thomas would have despised. He had used a dead man's name as cover, and I could not let that stand. I placed the letter on the table facing Mark. His eyes dropped to the handwriting immediately. Thomas wrote in a slant, firm and narrow, like a man in a hurry who still cared about being understood. Your father gave this to me 6 months before he died, I said. He asked me to read it again if I ever felt pressured to give up control of what we built. Mark picked it up with both hands. Vanessa looked irritated, as if even Thomas's handwriting was an inconvenience. Mark read in silence. I knew the words almost by memory. Ellie, if the day comes when grief makes everyone forget who kept this family standing, do not let them rewrite our life. You know the accounts. You know the business. You know people. I trust you more than I trust anyone with what remains after I am gone. Protect yourself even from those we love, if love starts asking you to disappear. Mark's mouth tightened. He placed the letter down, but he kept his fingers on the edge of the paper. Dad thought I would do this? His voice was small now. That hurt more than his anger had. Your father thought comfort could make people careless, I said. He hoped he was wrong. Vanessa exhaled, impatient. This is emotional manipulation. Thomas was sick when he wrote that. We cannot treat a sentimental letter like a business document. Robert's expression hardened for the first time. Mrs. Whitaker's legal authority does not depend on the letter. The documents are clear. Of course you would say that, Vanessa said. You have always acted like you own this family's money. I turned to her. No, Vanessa. He acted like a banker. You acted like an heir. Her face went still. Mark whispered her name, but she ignored him. You have no idea how hard it has been, she said, her voice low now, the sweetness gone. Mark. Carrying the company, me trying to keep things organized, you sitting in that big house acting noble while everyone works around your moods. There it was. Not concern. Resentment. Bare, plain, almost relieving in its honesty. My moods, I repeated. You mean my grief. I mean your refusal to move on. Mark looked at her as if she had become a stranger in the chair beside him. Maybe she had not changed at all. Maybe he was simply seeing her without the soft lighting of agreement. I gathered Thomas's letter and slid it back into the folder. I moved on every morning I got out of bed and paid the bills. I moved on when I signed payroll after burying my husband. I moved on when I sat across from my son while he treated my competence like a family problem. The room was quiet enough to hear the clock on the wall. Vanessa looked away first. Mark did not. Mom, he said. What happens now? I stood smoothing my coat. Now you learn the difference between being trusted and being entitled. Mark followed me out of the conference room, but Vanessa stayed behind for several seconds, gathering her purse, her sunglasses, and whatever version of herself she planned to wear next. I could hear her heels on the tile a few steps behind us, sharp and quick, but for once Mark did not slow down to wait for her. In the lobby he touched my elbow, then pulled his hand back as if he no longer knew whether he had the right. Mom, he said. Can we talk somewhere else? I looked at the tellers, the people waiting near the coffee station, the young mother helping her little boy count quarters for a savings deposit. Life kept moving around us, ordinary and indifferent. That is what betrayal never understands. It thinks the whole world should stop for its performance, but most days people still buy stamps, pay bills, and ask for balance receipts. We can talk here, I said. Mark's face tightened with embarrassment. Please. There was a small seating area near the front windows, 2 chairs and a low table with financial brochures no one ever read. I sat. He sat across from me. Vanessa approached, but Mark looked up and said, Give me a minute. She stopped as if he had raised a wall. Excuse me. I said give me a minute. His voice was not loud. That made it stronger. Vanessa's mouth opened, then closed. She walked toward the lobby doors and stood near the glass, pretending to check her phone. Mark watched her for a moment, then looked down at his hands. They were Thomas's hands, broad-palmed, with the same faint scar near the thumb from a childhood bike accident. I hated noticing that. Love is cruel in the details it preserves. I thought I was helping, he said. I did not answer right away. Outside, a delivery truck rumbled past on High Street, spraying slush from the curb. Did you? He swallowed. At first, yes. The house, the accounts, all of it felt like too much for you. Felt like that to whom? He rubbed his jaw. To me. To Vanessa. I do not know. You never asked me. He nodded once slowly. No, it was the first honest thing he had said all week. I let it sit between us. Honesty needs air, especially when it arrives late. After Dad died, he said, I felt like I was supposed to step into his place. The company, the family, all of it. Vanessa kept saying I needed to be the man of the family. I looked at him carefully. And what did that mean? His eyes flicked toward the doors where Vanessa stood stiff and polished. Control, I guess. Your father never controlled me. I know. Do you? He looked at me then, and the shame in his face was not enough to fix anything, but it was enough to show me something human still remained. I think I forgot, he said. No, I said softly. You chose not to remember. He flinched, but he did not argue. That mattered. Across the lobby, Vanessa made a phone call. Her voice was low, but agitation has a shape even when words are hidden. She turned her back to us, one hand pressed to her forehead. Mark watched her, and I saw the question forming inside him. Not about the money anymore. About his marriage. About how many decisions had been his and how many had been placed in his mouth until they sounded natural. Did you know about the password attempts? I asked. He closed his eyes. She said we needed access to see the full picture. She said if we waited for you to approve everything, you would get overwhelmed and refuse out of pride. And the company? I knew she was setting up something. I did not know about the mailbox. I did not know she tried to move money before you signed. I believed part of that. Not all. Belief becomes careful after it has been insulted. Mark, you stood in a restaurant and told me I could not manage my own life. His eyes reddened, but he did not cry. I know. You did it in front of family. I know. You brought a pen. That was the part that caught him. His mouth tightened, and for the first time he looked truly ashamed. Words can be excused as emotion. Pen is preparation. I am sorry, he said. The apology was small, almost plain. It did not ask me to comfort him. It did not explain itself. That made it better than most apologies people offer after they are caught. But better is not the same as enough. I stood and he stood with me. Vanessa ended her call and hurried over. Mark, we need to go. I spoke to someone who said the bank is overstepping. I looked at her. Of course you did. Her eyes narrowed. This is not finished. No, I said. But your access is. Mark turned to her. Did you try to move that money without telling me? Vanessa's face softened instantly. Too instantly. Honey, not here. Here, he said. She glanced at me, then at Robert's office door, then back at her husband. For the first time, she looked less like a woman managing a problem and more like a woman standing in one. I did what needed to be done, she said. Mark stared at her. That sentence was all the confession he needed, even if no court would call it one. I picked up my blue folder. I am going home, I said. Margaret will contact both of you by Monday. Mark looked at me. Can I come by later? I paused at the door. Once I would have said yes before he finished asking. Once, being his mother meant keeping the porch light on no matter how late he returned. But that morning I thought of the birthday papers, the restaurant silence, Thomas's letter, and the little private mailbox near Polaris Parkway. Not today, I said. The words were gentle. The boundary was not. Then I stepped outside into the cold Ohio air, unlocked my old Buick and drove myself home. By Monday morning, Margaret Ellis had done exactly what I hired her to do. She did not raise her voice. She did not threaten anyone. She simply sent letters, and sometimes a letter on proper stationery can do what shouting never could. One went to Mark, formally notifying him that his administrative access had been revoked and that any future requests involving the trust, the house, or my personal accounts would go through her office. One went to Vanessa, instructing her to preserve all records connected to VMW Holdings, including emails, bank forms, digital files, and communications with any attorney or financial advisor. One went to the company board, reminding them that Whitaker Medical Supply still had governance rules, and that family tension did not excuse irregular movement of funds. I sat at my kitchen table while Margaret read the final drafts over the phone. Her voice was even almost dry, which I appreciated. At 71, she had spent 4 decades watching relatives become strangers over money. She did not waste sympathy where clarity was needed. "Eleanor," she said, "once these are sent, they may react emotionally." I looked at the note Vanessa had left on my refrigerator 2 weeks earlier. "Ask Mark before paying large bills." She had written it in blue ink with a little heart at the end, as if humiliation became kindness with decoration. "Let them," I said. "I am done reacting for them." After the call, I removed the note from the refrigerator. The paper tore slightly where the magnet had pressed into it. I held it in my hand longer than necessary. It was such a small thing, 1 sentence, 7 words, yet it carried the whole weight of what they had tried to make me believe. Ask Mark. Ask permission. Ask the child I raised whether I could use the money I earned, in the house I helped pay for, under the roof where I had buried pieces of my youth into every room. I folded the note once and placed it inside the blue folder. Proof does not always have numbers on it. Sometimes proof is a cheerful command stuck beside a grocery list. By noon Mark called. I did not answer. At 12:16 he texted, "Mom, please. Vanessa is saying Margaret is trying to destroy us." At 12:28 another message came. "I need to understand what you want." I read that one twice. For most of my life, what I wanted had been treated like a small side matter, something to be considered after everyone else's needs had filled the room. I wanted peace, so I swallowed insults. I wanted family dinners, so I ignored the sharp looks Vanessa gave my old serving dishes. I wanted my son close, so I pretended not to notice when his visits became inspections. Now he wanted to understand. Late understanding is still useful, but it should never be mistaken for innocence. I wrote back 1 sentence. "I want my life returned to my hands." He did not respond for nearly an hour. When he did, the message was shorter. "I am sorry." I placed the phone face down. Apologies are seeds, not fruit. They have to grow before they can feed anyone. That afternoon, I drove to Whitaker Medical Supply for the first time in almost 8 months. The building sat in an industrial park outside Columbus. Beige brick, glass doors, American flag at the entrance. The same modest sign Thomas once polished with his sleeve before our grand opening. I parked my Buick between 2 shiny trucks and sat for a moment with both hands on the wheel. I could still see Thomas walking through those doors carrying a box of catalogs, smiling like the future had personally invited him in. Inside, the receptionist, Amy, looked startled when she saw me. "Mrs. Whitaker," she said, standing too quickly. "It is so good to see you." "Thank you, Amy." Her eyes moved toward the hallway leading to Mark's office. News travels faster than mail in a family business. I walked past the framed company awards, past the photographs of charity golf outings, past the conference room where I had once sat quietly beside Thomas while men assumed I was there to pour coffee. Mark came out of his office before I reached it. His tie was loose, his face drawn. Behind him, 2 board members stood near the doorway, both looking uncomfortable. "Mom," he said. "I was going to call you." "I know." Margaret had already scheduled an emergency governance review for Wednesday. Until then, Mark's authority over certain financial decisions was suspended. Not fired. Not ruined. Suspended. There is a difference between justice and revenge, and I had learned long ago not to confuse them. "Can we talk?" he asked. I looked past him into the office Thomas had once used. Vanessa had placed a white leather chair where Thomas's old green armchair used to sit. She had removed the family photograph from the bookshelf and replaced it with a silver sculpture that looked expensive and empty. That hurt more than I expected. "Not in there," I said. Mark followed my eyes and his face changed. Maybe he had not noticed. Maybe he had let her erase things one decoration at a time. I turned toward the conference room instead. "We will talk where business belongs," I said. "At the table with records." In the conference room, the table looked smaller than I remembered. Maybe it had always been that size, and I had only felt smaller sitting beside Thomas while other people spoke over me. Mark sat across from me with a legal pad in front of him, though he did not write anything. The 2 board members, Alan Price and Denise Rowland, took seats near the far end, both careful with their expressions. They had known me for years as Thomas's wife, the woman who brought cookies at Christmas and mailed handwritten thank you notes after charity events. They had not known me as the woman who could read a balance sheet faster than most men could explain one. Margaret joined by speakerphone, her voice crisp through the little black device in the center of the table. Robert had already forwarded the bank review, and Denise had a copy of the internal finance report. Numbers do not blush. They do not apologize. They simply sit there, neat and undeniable, waiting for people to stop pretending they are opinions. The attempted transfer was listed first. Then came 3 consulting reimbursements approved by Mark, but connected to invoices Vanessa had submitted through a lifestyle management company she used for personal expenses. None of the amounts were large enough alone to sound shocking. $2,000 here. $4,500 there. A private club deposit labeled client relations. A furniture purchase labeled office refresh. Greed, I had learned, rarely begins with a suitcase of cash. It begins with one small excuse that survives. Mark stared at the pages as if they had been written in a language he used to understand. I approved some of these because Vanessa told me they were legitimate business expenses, he said. Ellen looked tired. Mark, approval is responsibility. No one raised their voice. That made everything worse for him. Quiet rooms leave nowhere to hide. Margaret explained the temporary changes. Mark would remain at the company during the review, but his authority over payments, trust-related distributions, and vendor approvals would be suspended. Denise would co-sign operational expenses. Margaret's office would audit anything connected to Vanessa, VMW Holdings, and the retirement planning attorney she had contacted without my consent. Vanessa was not in the room. Mark said she had gone home with a headache. I believed she had gone home to make phone calls. People like Vanessa do not retreat. They reorganize. When Margaret finished, Mark looked at me across the table. Are you trying to take the company from me? For a moment I saw him at 17, standing in our driveway beside his first used car, asking if I thought he could handle it. Back then I had tossed him the keys because trust is how children learn to become adults. Now I folded my hands on the table because consequences are how adults learn what trust costs. No, I said. I am trying to stop you from giving away what your father and I built, because you were too proud to ask questions. His face tightened. I trusted my wife. You stopped trusting your mother to do it. He looked down. That was the end of the meeting, though not the end of the damage. The review took 6 weeks. During that time, Vanessa sent me 2 long emails. The first was full of hurt feelings. The second was full of accusations. I answered neither. Margaret answered both. Mark came by once, standing on my porch with a paper bag from the bakery I liked. I did not invite him and write away. I let him stand there while the wind moved through the maple branches behind him. He apologized again, not smoothly this time, not in the careful language of a man hoping for quick forgiveness. He said he had been ashamed of needing me after Thomas died, so he let Vanessa convince him that control felt like strength. He said he had confused leadership with possession. I listened. Then I took the bakery bag and told him he could come in for coffee, but not for absolution. That would take longer. By the end of April, Vanessa had moved out of their house in Dublin and into a condo near Easton. Mark did not tell me much and I did not ask for details. Some endings are private even when their causes are not. The company survived. The trust remained intact. The house stayed mine. On the first warm Saturday of spring, I cleaned Thomas's office at home. I opened the windows, dusted the shelves, and placed his green armchair back where it belonged after retrieving it from storage. Then I walked to the refrigerator and removed the last trace of Vanessa's handwriting from my kitchen. In its place I put a plain white index card with 4 words written in black ink. Ask no one first. I stood there for a while, listening to the quiet hum of the refrigerator and the birds outside the window. I was still 68. Still widowed. Still a mother with a heart that had been bruised by the child it loved. But I was not diminished. My son had mistaken my age for weakness because my power did not announce itself. It lived in ledgers, memory, patience, and signatures placed exactly where they needed to be. And when the bank called him before he could call me helpless, the truth finally had my voice.